The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your chest heavy and your mind whirl. It was the last battle, the one that would determine the fate of our world. Everyone knew it. The city had been overrun by dark forces for days. Towers once gleaming with life now lay in ruins, and the streets, once bustling with laughter and joy, were eerily silent. Xion and I stood at the top of the hill overlooking the chaos. I had always known him to be brave, a leader, someone who never hesitated when others faltered. But today, as he turned to look at me, his usually unshakable face wavered for just a moment. The flicker of something deeper sorrow, maybe even regret crossed his eyes, and then it was gone, replaced with the hard resolve that carried him through so many battles. "We have no other choice," he said, voice firm despite the world crumbling around us. I nodded, though my heart screamed for an alternative. "There's always another way," I muttered under my breath, half hoping he wouldn't hear me. But Xion did hear, and he gave me a soft, sad smile. "Not this time. This time, it's up to me." I had known Xion since we were children. We grew up together, trained together, fought side by side. He was always the protector, the one who stood between the darkness and me. But this was different. This wasn't just another battle. This was his last stand. And somewhere deep down, I think I had known for a while what he was planning. He took a step toward me, reaching out to touch my arm, his hand warm against the cold wind. "You have to trust me, Lyra," he said softly, his eyes searching mine for something, maybe approval, maybe forgiveness. "I don't want to lose you," I whispered, my voice barely audible, but he heard it. "You won't," he replied, his tone reassuring but hollow. "Not forever." Xion had always been a man of promises, of unwavering loyalty and hope, but this felt like a promise he couldn't keep. He pulled me into a hug, and I felt the strength of him, the solid presence that had always been a comfort, slipping away. "In the next life," he whispered into my ear, "things will be different. Maybe then, you'll love me the way I've always loved you." My breath caught in my throat, and I pulled back just enough to look at him. There it was, truth I had always known, but I'd been too afraid to confront. Xion loved me, and I had never been able to give him what he wanted, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to love someone the way he loved me. Before I could say anything, before I could tell him I was sorry, or beg him to stay, or even try to understand what was happening, he turned and walked away. The last thing I saw was the back of him, striding toward the battlefield, his figure fading into the storm of smoke and fire. But the strangest thing wasn't the world around me, it was the memories that had stayed. I remembered everything: the war, Xion's sacrifice, his final words, and the emptiness that followed his absence. I had been prepared to lose him, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. I had been reborn. Somehow, the universe had given me another chance, another life, and though the details of this new world were different, streets were bustling again, the city restored to its former glory, one thing was constant. Xion was here. I found him easily enough. The connection we shared in the past life was still there, pulling me toward him like a magnet. When I saw him, standing tall and strong, alive and well, my heart raced, but there was something different about him, something I hadn't expected. He didn't remember me. At first, I thought it was just the shock of being reborn, that maybe his memories were buried somewhere deep inside, waiting to resurface. But as I spent time with him, tried to talk to him, tried to remind him of what we had shared, it became painfully clear. Xion didn't remember anything, not the war, not his sacrifice, and not me. I was a stranger to him. And worse than Faith didn't love me, the man who had given his life for me, who had loved me with a devotion I had never fully understood, had moved on. He had started a new life in this world, without me. When I woke, everything felt different. The world was not the same, and yet, it was familiar in ways I couldn't explain. The sky was clearer, the air lighter, as if the weight of the war had lifted from the very fabric of existence. For weeks, I tried to make sense of it. I couldn't comprehend how this could happen. How could the universe be so cruel as to give me back the man I had lost, only to take his love from me? Xion was different now. He was still kind, still brave, still the man I had known in the past life, but there was a coldness to him, A distance that hadn't been there before. It was as if the parts of him that had loved me, that had sacrificed everything for me, had been erased. And in their place was a stranger. I watched him from afar, day after day, hoping that something would trigger his memory, hoping that one day he would look at me with the same love and devotion that he once had. But every time our eyes met, there was nothing, no recognition, no spark, just indifference. I began to wonder if I had done something wrong. Had I waited too long to love him, and I missed my chance in the last life? And now, in this one, I was being punished for it. The thought gnawed at me, leaving me hollow and broken. I thought about his last words often. In the next life, things will be different, but nothing was different. If anything, things were worse. Now, it was me who loved him, and he was the one who didn't care. It wasn't until one quiet evening that everything changed. I had been wandering the city, lost in thought, when I saw him. Sion was sitting at a small cafe, laughing with someone, a woman. She was beautiful, with long, dark hair and a smile that lit up her entire face. My heart clenched as I watched them together, the ease with which they interacted, the way he looked at her so full of warmth and affection. It was the way he had once looked at me, in another life. I turned away, unable to watch any longer. The pain was too much, too raw. I had spent so long waiting for him, hoping that he would remember, that he would come back to me. But now, it was clear. He didn't love me anymore. He had moved on, and I was stuck, trapped in the past, clinging to a love that no longer existed. I wandered the city aimlessly, my mind racing, my heart aching, and that's when I saw her. An old woman, sitting on a bench by the river. She was watching the water, her eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored my own. For reasons I couldn't explain, I sat her down next to her. She turned to me, her gaze soft but knowing. "You've lost someone," she said, her voice gentle. I nodded, unable to find the words to explain what I was feeling. She smiled sadly. "I've seen it before. People who come back to this life, holding on to the past, waiting for something that's already gone." I stared at her, confused. "How do you know?" "I've been where you are," she said simply, holding on to a love that no longer exists, hoping that things would be different in this life. "But they're not," I whispered, my voice breaking. "No," she agreed, her gaze distant. "They're not. But that's the thing about love. It's not always meant to last forever. Sometimes, it's meant to teach us how to let go." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. I had been holding on to Sion, to the love we had shared in the past life. For so long, I had been waiting for him to remember, to come back to me, maybe. The next morning, I woke with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew what I had to do. I found Sion at the edge of the city, near the river. He was alone, staring out at the water, lost in thought. For a moment, I hesitated, but then, I took a deep breath and approached him. "Sion," I said softly, and he turned to look at me, his expression curious but distant. "Lyra," he said, nodding in acknowledgement. "Is everything okay?" I smiled, though it didn't quite. "I think it is now," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but I meant every word. For the first time in a long while, I truly believed it. Sion looked at me, waiting for an explanation, but I wasn't sure where to begin. So many thoughts swirled in my mind, memories of our past life, the love he had once felt for me, the pain of losing him again in this new world. But standing there, with the river flowing steadily beside us and the sun setting behind the distant hills, I realized that none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was this moment. What mattered was letting him go. "I need to tell you something," I started, my hands trembling slightly as I folded them together. "In another life, you and I, we were everything to each other. You loved me in ways I didn't fully understand then. You gave everything for me, hoping that in the next life, I'd finally love you the way you deserved." Sion's brow furrowed slightly, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Lyra, I know," I interrupted gently, shaking my head. "I know you don't remember, and I don't expect you to. I've spent so long waiting for you to remember, waiting for that love to come back. But the truth is, I've been holding on to something that's gone. You sacrificed everything for me, and I spent so much time trying to repay that, to give you the love you wanted in this life. But you've moved on." Sion's expression softened, but it still didn't speak. He didn't need to. I could see the understanding beginning to settle in his eyes, even if the details of our past life remained hidden from him. And that's okay, I continued, my voice growing steadier, because I'm not the same person I was in that life either. I've changed, too, and I think, for the first time, I'm ready to accept that you're not the man who loved me anymore. You're someone new, and you deserve to live this life without the weight of our past hanging over you. I could feel the words releasing the tension in my chest as I spoke. Every sentence was a step closer to letting go of the pain, the regret, the love I had clung to for so long. It was freeing, in a way I hadn't expected. Xion looked at me for a long time, his eyes searching mine for something, though I wasn't sure what. Lyra, he said softly, his voice full of empathy, I don't remember that life. I wish I could, but this is all I know now. This is who I am. I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes, but a sense of peace washing over me. I know, and that's enough. We stood in silence for a moment, the wind rustling through the trees, the river gently flowing beside us. For the first time since this new life began, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence with explanations or pleas. I didn't need Xion to remember. I didn't need him to love me. I didn't need anything from him anymore. I just want you to be happy, I whispered, the tears finally spilling over, but without the bitterness or pain I had carried for so long. That's all I've ever wanted. Xion took a step closer, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. You too, Lyra, he said softly. I hope you find peace. I smiled through the tears, a genuine, heartfelt smile. I think I already have. In the days that followed, something inside me shifted. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my soul, a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Letting go of Xion, letting go of the past life we had shared, wasn't as painful as I thought it would be. It was freeing. For the first time in both this life and the last, I wasn't defined by someone else's love for me or my need to return it. I was free to love myself, to live my life on my own terms. The memories of Xion, of the sacrifice he made, would always be with me, but they no longer felt like a burden. They were a part of who I was, but they no longer dictated who I would become. I spent more time exploring the city, reconnecting with people, finding joy in the small moments I had once taken for granted. There was beauty in this life, in its simplicity, in its ability to heal and offer new beginnings, and I embraced it with open arms. I still thought about Xion from time to time. How could I not? He had been such a pivotal part of my life, in both worlds. But now, when I thought of him, it was with a sense of gratitude rather than longing. I was thankful for the love we had shared, even if it didn't last. I was thankful for the lessons I had learned, the strength I had gained. One afternoon, while walking through the bustling marketplace, I caught sight of Xion again. He was with her, the woman I had seen him with that day at the cafe. They were laughing together, their hands intertwined, and the sight of it no longer stung the way it once had. I smiled to myself as I watched them for a moment longer, then turned away, continuing down the street. There was no more sadness, no more regret. Xion was happy, and so was I. In the end, his sacrifice had given us both a new life, and while it wasn't the life he had envisioned, it was the life we both needed. He had let go of the past, and now, I had too. As the sun set behind the distant hills, casting a golden glow over the city, I realized something important. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean the love we had shared was any less real or important. It simply meant that I was ready to move forward, to live the life I was meant to live in my own terms.